Morning, buddy.
Howdy, Dan. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. I'm excited to ask you about the upcoming Fall Fest at Seasons Yield. I saw there's going to be gourds and barbecue and a hay maze. The hay king will be crowned.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about with The Office, right?
The gourd patch, if you will.
The gourd patch.
Yes. So good. I feel a little more comfortable having an episode because somehow some of our friends have listened to the first few.
Oh, yes.
And
it
bless
leaked.
their heart, they gave us some positive feedback. So I feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah, very
Now that a
encouraging.
few people have listened, we have a few person traction on this thing. So it puts me a little bit at ease. How about you?
Oh yeah. It's been very encouraging, like to hear guys at church be like, "Hey, I heard the podcast." And it kind of, in the back of my head, I'm like, "Oh, how did they already hear it?"
Yeah.
But all good. And so we definitely need a little wind in our sails since we're figuring this out still. But yeah, really fun. I'm having fun doing the podcast too. It's like a little vacation we get to take every morning to just sit.
Yeah.
No other work things, no kids. Talk through, thus far, talk through our own stories, but I'm really also excited to have some friends on, talk through their stories too.
Starting next time. Yeah, the Fall Fest will celebrate our 3rd anniversary of the Bread Barn and making the bakery our full-time living. So it's a
So
big
cool.
celebration for us.
Yeah.
And it pairs up nicely with the Harvest Fest. But I got really excited about a hay bale maze. I have difficulty letting go of an idea.
Mm-hmm. Even if the numbers start not penciling
the
out.
worst idea. So the numbers didn't pencil out on this one.
How does a hay maze? You got to tell me how a hay maze doesn't pencil out. Like,
well, I don't want to spend too long talking about our Harvest Fest.
No, I got to hear about this.
The easy way to make the hay bale maze make sense is to charge ticket sales to the Harvest Fest, which is common. And
sure, we just did like a sunflower festival in the county south of us. I thought it was going to be a small thing, maybe a couple hundred people there. Thousands of people went to this, and it was really beautiful. Rolling fields of sunflowers in peak bloom in the mountains. I mean, it was awesome, but I was still amazed at the turnout for this festival. So,
and
yeah.
Did you pay tickets?
Yes, we paid. I can't remember. I want to say it was like $10 a head. I mean, Jill and I were doing the math. Crazy.
It's
for
phenomenal.
that farm. Yeah. Tens of thousands of revenue per day just in ticket sales, which is pretty awesome.
That's my first inkling. And Fawn and Ben and a few of our employees shot my idea down to do ticket sales because it's just inconsistent with who we want to be as a farm and a bakery, and have coming to the place be cost prohibitive. We don't want to do that, even though that's the best way to justify the hay bale maze. So I had the hay bale maze is like the signature of the event, at least in my mind.
Are you going to crown a hay king like Dwight Schrute on The Office?
Would be epic. I've thought about giving a significant prize to the fastest time through the maze.
That would be fun.
So we had 400 hay bales delivered yesterday.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't think it's going to be nearly enough to do this.
So it's getting more in the hole.
Okay, so entrepreneurially, I'm very passionate about the idea.
Yeah.
I couldn't let it go, so I needed to do it, even though it's costing an arm and a leg to buy in this. I didn't buy hay even, it's straw. So I can't even feed it to the animals.
Yeah, you got nothing to do with it. Just bedding.
So
you're going to have bedding for as long as it lasts.
Yeah, to maximize the duration of this, I'm going to build the hay bale maze in the high tunnel so it's not subjected to the elements.
Okay.
And
maybe you could resell the straw bales.
So that's one outlet based on how my boys ran all over the straw bales yesterday. There's not going to be much left intact. So I kind of wrote that off as a payback option, but very excited about the hay bales. So the maze, it'll probably be 7 feet tall. So adults will go in there. This is a hay bale maze that you go into, and you don't want to let little Johnny go in by himself because you may not see him for a few hours.
So it's way too hard.
We want this to be a challenge to,
awesome.
More than
young
just
and old.
Young. Yeah. So
this is
must
so
be
great.
accompanied by a parent. So
I love how an idea like this can take root, and then it doesn't matter it started out as like, oh, it'll be a good, attract people to the farm day, and it'll be good for the business. And now it's like, no, I'm making it the most difficult hay maze. I don't care the cost.
Right. I think I wanted to be, yes, an epic hay bale maze, not just a single layer hay maze that, my 3-year-old son could figure out his way through. So I have high hopes for it, but I think you want to know the cost? What I think it's going to cost?
I'm going to take a just shot in the dark. You said you bought 400 bales of straw. Mm-hmm. Man, I've not bought straw recently. I'm going to guess $2,000 maybe. I can't remember how much straw is. Are there small square bales?
Your memory is spot on.
Really?
Yes. So it's a $2,000 expenditure for the straw bales, and that's not going to finish it. So I think it's going to be another shipment needs to come in before October 14th.
Oh man.
So I have several ideas of how to pay it off, which I'm going to tell you about after the event.
Yeah, I want to hear how this goes. I like how you've planted this. You've set the stage. Mm-hmm. You've laid out the maze, and I'm excited to see if you break even on this adventure.
Yes. So I can tell you now, it's forced me to be creative with how we're going to pay for it. So again, we want this to be a not cost prohibitive event.
Yeah.
So we want it to be a large gathering. We don't want to charge ticket sales.
Yes, you're not charging at the door.
Not charging. So I need to figure out how to make this maze pay for itself, or how to be creative in other ventures on that day to make this pay for itself. So I have 2 or 3 ideas, and I'm confident I can hustle my way through that. What is looking like it'll probably be a $3,000 hay bale maze. I think I'm going to come out on top.
Nice.
So
until next time.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. But
that's awesome.
You got to come. You got to go through the hay bale maze.
I definitely will. I'm going to get lost in there. I'm going to get lost, find myself, get out, be crowned hay king.
All right.
I've got a quick one for you of just something new that I'm almost certainly going to try. We're 95% going to do. So we've been selling off. So cattle prices are really high. I've been selling off cows. I think for the first time, I might take some cows to the stockyard, which for anyone who doesn't know, one of the ways to buy and sell livestock is at a stockyard, which is a central hub. It's its own, standalone business. And it's a central hub where both buyers and sellers meet to sell animals. And it's one of the reasons I have not done it is because I haven't needed to, because I've been able to sell or buy with neighbors. And that's usually, from what I know, that is usually one of the best ways to do it, because you're not having to haul animals farther up the road than you need to. You can work out usually better deals farm to farm versus bringing a middleman in like the stockyard.
It's like buying and selling a vehicle to your buddy, vice going to the used car lot,
right,
or the car dealer.
Yes, it is similar in that sense. It's different though in that the other reason I haven't done it is that it's a auction. Mm-hmm. So it is like going to Las Vegas with your cattle, because you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, okay, these are what the prices are today in Virginia. This is what generally the cattle are selling for in Virginia. And so you can bet that you'll generally get that price, but it could be a little less. Yeah. It could be a little more. It could be a lot less. So I'm not a gambler, so I am nervous about it. We're only going to take, maybe less than 10 cows up there.
But you're inclined to gamble because the prices are
really high right now. Yeah. And these are ideal animals to be sold in that context. So we're going to give it a shot.
When are you going?
So we sort cows Friday, and we'll either go on, we'll either go next week or the week after, just depending on, we've been getting a lot of rain recently. That might change plans graze wise, but it's going to be in the next couple of weeks. So I'll let you know how it goes.
So we need a part 2 on that as well.
Yeah. It's my own little hay maze adventure.
Okay.
That's what we're
All
trying.
Right. Love it. Okay. Buddy, we're entering into this episode 4. This is the second part of hearing yours and Jill's story about where we sit now, Big Spring Farm. So this is your 9th year at Big Spring.
Crazy.
Running the wedding venue and farming. Last episode, we ended on you purchasing the farm. Can you talk us through what the trajectories looked like from day one of stepping on Big Spring to now?
Yeah. So 9 years makes me, it's crazy how time flies. The trajectory. So when we first started the venue, we kind of thought it would be almost maybe not just a side project, but sort of like half of my time, maybe half my time's farming, half my time's, supporting the venue and making that happen. Year 1 of the venue, that's how things worked. Year 2, I believe it was, the venue had grown so much that basically I realized I cannot farm anymore. And we had to really dial all that back. And I really had to focus all my energy towards the venue, which was at the time, an identity crisis for me. I didn't realize it until I started considering, quote, not being a farmer. But a lot of who I thought I was tied up in what I was doing. And, I think we all fall into that, like putting our identity in a thing, in this world. And yeah, there was all this pride around, I'm a farmer. I've seen every sunrise and every sunset for years because I'm out there working. I work harder than, again, pride. I work harder than anybody else I know. That was a big mentality for me. All that farming, it's a very, even when you're in the trenches of it, it still is it's romantic in the beginning, and then it becomes like a deep in your soul, rooted thing, because there's so much life in it. And you deal with death as well. And it's just, so to me, it's so all encompassing in your life. People often say like farming's not just a vocation, it's a lifestyle. And, I lived that lifestyle to the point where walking away from it was like, well, wait a minute, who am I then?
Can I ask you a question real quick? At that juncture, when the venue's taken off, it may seem maybe the answer is really easy, but because it was such a part of your identity, why did you go venue and slow the farming, vice slow the venue and increase the farming?
Oh yeah, well the nuts and bolts of it is simply just because the venue is so much more profitable. Mm-hmm. And years 1 and 2, we started with this dream of, we're leasing the property. We want to, for 2 years, and we want to make it work to buy it. That was the written intention of the lease, is that at the end of these 2 years, that the previous owners would be exiting the property and we'd have the first option to buy it. So honestly, a lot of it was just practical, and a lot of it was practical in the sense that like the venue was way more profitable than the farming. And then a lot of it was because Jill and I had been in the wedding industry as photographers, and we shot weddings for 11 years. We knew how much each wedding was going to need from us in terms of care and attention and execution, because there was no team at the time like there is now. It was just me and Jill, and I would, hire one helper once in a while. So we knew that to really do these weddings the way we wanted them to be done, like in terms of our side of the venue side of things, as excellently as possible, we needed to focus solely on that. So both the money thing and knowing what it was going to take. And yeah, and it took a lot that first year. I mean, it was a lot of work, a lot of, it's funny because people have asked me many times, like, what's the craziest thing that's happened at a wedding? We really haven't had that many crazy things happen because the shooting weddings was like 11 years of market research where we saw all these different venues in all these different, parts of the world, and so many weddings done so many different ways that by the time we had Big Spring as a venue, we didn't even realize it until we started the venue. Like, wow, we really know what to look out for, how to set couples up for success. And we were fortunate too. I think by God's grace, we just had really lovely weddings. And also we knew we needed these weddings to be amazing. Just like the first year, we wanted those first weddings to just be, absolutely beautiful. All the guests walking away saying that was so much fun. What a beautiful place, because that's our best marketing vehicle, even to this day. Yeah. Is having a great event is like you get 100 people, 200 people touring your venue, basically taking it for a test drive. And if they have an awesome time, they're going to tell their friends, I just went to the coolest wedding. I just had so much fun at this place. You got to check it out.
What is it, when you say you're talking about the hard work of farming and then the hard work you put in the first years for the venue? What does hard work look like with the wedding venue? Because I think there's a misconception. You got a beautiful property, you have the infrastructure, and people just show up and the preacher does his thing. What can you describe what the hard work looked like for you?
Oh man, well, a lot of it was wearing all the hats of the venue. Like I was the groundskeeper, and from our perspective, the venue needs to be, the landscaping, the lawn, the building itself needs to be as perfect as possible. So there's that. Then I was the customer service and salesperson for the venue itself. So doing all the site visits for couples that are looking for a venue, doing all the client care once they've booked. Well, and in between, when, getting the contracts out, getting them signed, walking people through that. So all those things. And then knowing the venue was great to start with. Our particular property had an existing barn that had been largely remodeled by the previous owners that we were leasing from. So it didn't take a huge CapEx to get the venue started like initially, but we knew enough about events and as we were having more on the property, we knew there were some key changes that needed to be made, or really upgrades, I would guess you could say, that needed to be made. And so I was fronting, or I was the guy that planned all that executed most of it. We didn't hire contractors in for a lot of stuff in the beginning just because we didn't have the money. And we had, money for materials and then my time. So that part of it was a lot. And I think for the venue, even today, it's Jill's and my full-time job to continue to do. We have our farmhand now, our farm manager now, Bailey, who spearheads landscaping and spearheads lots of boots on the ground stuff in terms of the property on the farm. We have an admin who's wonderful for taking care of client care, vendor relations, overnight guests, events, that kind of stuff. And then so much of my time is spent on the sales side of things, Jill on the marketing side of things, and then me and her on the continued vision of what we need and where we're going, and what God's got next for the business. So yeah, there's more to it than you might think. It does feel like a big piece of it is building out a great space or having a lovely, naturally beautiful location. And then there's so much, it's somebody's wedding day. So there's so much care that needs to be taken. We always tell our team, especially our part-time crew, which is amazing. We always tell them, I use the analogy of like, this isn't Subway. Like, we can't make this couple another sandwich if we get it wrong, which is kind of a dumb analogy, but I feel like we've all,
makes sense. Yeah.
This is their one wedding day. So we treat every wedding at the farm like this is the one and only wedding we're ever going to have. And we got to be able to hang our hat on it. Does that mean we've never, that everyone's always, there's things that we've learned and grown through. But by the grace of God, again, they've all been like little things. It's not been, I wish I had more. Well, I'm glad. I guess I don't have more fun stories about this one time
tragedies.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. But I interrupted you. So you were kind of in year 2. You made the big shift. You were going to do venue. It was going to be full time.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to farming? Kind of where is it now? And then just the continued glide path for the venue.
Yeah. So we tabled farming for, I believe it was year 2 or year 3.
And how many acres did you own at that time?
So at that time, we were leasing the original footprint of Big Spring. When we came to it was 36 acres approximately. And that encompassed the main house, the barn, the lake, and basically some fields, a little tiny bit of woods, few acres of woods. And we farmed all of that land, raising, we didn't have cattle because it was a smaller acreage. We just did poultry. So chickens, ducks, turkeys in the fall for Thanksgiving. We tabled all of that, again, year 2 or 3. And I solely focused on the venue side of things and really poured into growing that. And so by year 3, when we bought the venue, the bookings had gone from something like 7, I think it was 7 weddings our first year. And then it was like triple that our second year. And then we almost tripled again our third year. It's just crazy. So that, and then we've kind of stayed at we kind of found that's our ideal number. So we stayed right around that
50,
point.
60
Yeah, 50,
weddings.
60 weddings is a really good number for our region, for our property, we live here on the farm, right where the venue is. So, or relatively close to the venue. So it just worked perfectly on all fronts. And
were you shocked at the tripling by year? Were you just sitting in awe, or were you thinking, oh, I knew this would happen? What was your mindset then?
It was, I think I said this last time, we were kind of just heads down, putting one foot in front of the other and trying to stay on top of all the needs that created. And right in there, we hired an admin. That was one of our first. We hired guys to work the farm with me, to do all the landscaping with me at the time. And we started farming again as well, just on a small scale. I would call it a homestead scale. We sold to a couple restaurants in town, basically just enough to kind of make the whole enterprise sort of break even.
The farming enterprise
break even. And just because it was such a passion, I couldn't let it go. And I wanted to sort of just keep my foot in that door to see what possibilities might come up.
Yeah.
I was thinking, farming, venue. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's, I had another thought and it escaped me.
Yeah, I keep interrupting. That's fine.
No, you're good.
But your trajectory continued. Yeah. You plateaued, or found that the 50, 60 wedding mark was kind of primo for you all.
Yeah, perfect for our lifestyle.
Did you add back in farming after that kind of nice number was found by year? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we added back in farming. And yeah, it was kind of a side, that became more of the side hustle. Mm-hmm. And this is what I was going to say. And then we, the year we bought Big Spring, we knew, the lady that owned the farm across the road from us. And we had been introduced to her through the previous owners. This wonderful woman, she lives in Kendall, which is a retirement community in Lexington. But at one point, her and her husband were the largest landowners in Rockbridge County, where we live, or maybe I should say one of, but I've heard maybe even the largest. Thousands of acres in different pockets all around the county. Her husband, very notable farmer, pillar of the community. They helped start the horse center, which is we have one of the largest horse centers apparently here in Lexington.
Yeah.
On the East Coast. I think there's only one in Tennessee that rivals it. So anyway, really amazing family. She's a widow now. She's, I think, getting close to 90 or maybe in her 90s now. And anyway, at the time, we knew she owned this big farm across the road from Big Spring. And so when we bought Big Spring, I called up Miss Tardy and said, "Hey, Miss Tardy, we just bought Big Spring, and I've heard, because through the previous owners, they had said she's mentioned selling that property." So I called her and just said, "Hey, if you ever wanted to sell that farm, just wanted to let you know we're really invested in the neighborhood now, and we'd love to someday buy that property if you did ever want to sell it." And she said, "Well, buddy, I'm thinking 5 years. I'm gonna get all my stuff in order, and I'd love to sell it to you. So I'll let you know." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome." So we start saving up, and at the same time, we're planning to build cottages at the farm, because as the venue's growing, we're seeing a real, the venue's interesting because we're super close to the town of Lexington. So there is this, it's really logistically easy to plan events here because there's this huge support structure in the town of Lexington in terms of things that you also need on a wedding weekend, like lodging and dining and stuff for your guests to do, places to have rehearsal dinners. There's so much of that. And so we at the same time knew we wanted to add lodging at Big Spring. So we've got these two things running in parallel, building the cottages, and I've just thrown that opportunity or that possibility out to Miss Tardy about someday buying her farm, and she says 5 years. Well, we're going through all the planning for the cottages. We had to go to the county and get the zoning amended for the farm so that we could build lodging out on the property. There's just kind of the hoops you jump through that we got all these quotes from contractors, architect designing the cottages, all this time and thought and whatnot into doing that. And then I think it was the next summer, so maybe a little less than a year from that first time I talked to Miss Tardy, she calls me up and she says, "Hey, buddy, I'm glad I got you." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, how are you doing?" And we're catching up. And she said, "Well, the reason I'm calling is I'm thinking about selling that farm across the road." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And
4 years earlier than
yeah,
you.
yeah. I'm like, "Oh, good, okay." Yeah. Crap. And I'm trying to kind of feel out, like, what's your timeline? And she's thinking, and I said something like, because I'm trying to slow her down. I said, like, "Well, just let me know before you put it on the market and let's sit down and talk." And she goes, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's on the market." And I'm like, okay. And so to, I guess, paint a context for anybody it's not really in the farming world at all, which I imagine is many people, but when a property that shares a property line with you comes up for sale, it's worth considering as a farmer, because that's generally a once in a generation or maybe once in multi-generation thing that can happen. Mm-hmm. And land-based, of course, is connected to how much you can produce, thus how viable your farm is as a business. And that was one of the struggles with Big Spring, I think, long term, was my experience was in raising large livestock. Poultry is small livestock, but really cattle was one of my areas of growing expertise. Mm-hmm. And 36 acres is definitely enough to raise several cows, but not enough to make a true cattle business out of. Whereas Miss Tardy's farm across the road was 186 acres, I believe, and most of that was pasture. And that would be a game changer if we could add that to the property. Then all of a sudden, farming on a scale that would be tenable long term and profitable was very real. So big deal that she says she's open to selling it to me, and as far as she's concerned, it's on the market. So anyway, I'll make a long story short of this. The cottages, we ended up deciding to put those on hold because, of course, we'd been saving up and financially planning for those. And and I'm researching what I think is a fair price for her farm, and all the while we're praying about just how this is going to work out, because we don't know. I land on a number that I think is a fair purchase price for the property. I haven't talked to Miss Tardy yet about it. Still trying to just slow play with her and not rush things because we don't feel like we have like the clearest plan forward. And then at the same time, we've had this property is right across from our house. So, and Miss Tardy's really sweet. She's let us like walk around on it and go. It's a beautiful place. So go for hikes up in the hills on it and stuff. So for years, family and friends, when they come to visit, we'd say, hey, let's go on a big farm walk. And we'd walk all around our farm and all around the fields over across the road. And we've dreamt with friends and family for those years. Yeah, someday wouldn't it be cool to put a house on this little knoll? Or, you know, there's a great little valley that's kind of hidden that you could tuck houses around. So those dreams have been out there. And and we end up, those two things end up converging. Our ability to purchase the farm on our own, which is a possibility. And then God bringing people to the table I would say largely unsolicited. I mean, at most we said, yeah, hey, we're thinking we're going to buy that farm across the road. And then a month later, a dear friend would call and be like, hey, are you going to buy that farm? And are you still thinking about maybe doing home sites over there? And this idea for this agrarian community started to come to life. So to make a long story short, we tabled the cottages at that point in time. We went out to dinner with Miss Tardy. I went into it saying to Jill, the goal of this dinner is to continue to just stretch out our timeline. And I said, but as a sort of full stop, I do have an offer that I feel confident that we could do on our own because we don't want to let that key property go. And sure enough, Miss Tardy, we have a lovely dinner with her. She is so sweet. She's super smart. She went to Duke. She was one of the first graduates from Duke Nursing School. Amazing woman. A lovely dinner with her. And she ends it looking me straight in the eye and just goes, buddy, why don't you just make me an offer on that property? And at that dinner, made her an offer. We kind of went back and forth over small amounts of the number and then shook hands. And
that was it.
We left that dinner. Jill going, did we just agree to buy that farm? I thought that was
What year was that?
That was in 2017.
Okay.
And then we purchased the farm at the end of that year. I think it might have been maybe even the beginning of 2018 that we closed. Something like that. So we went from 36 acres to adding 186 acres to that. And then we subdivided off. We made 8 home sites. We still own one of them. We subdivided off those 8 home sites and sold 7 of them. It ended up being to family members and a few friends. And it's now this pocket of agrarian community that's surrounded by the farmland that we own. And so we farm those fields and the woods and as well as the pastures at Big Spring full time. And then we also have a couple rental farms now that we've added to the portfolio that we rent from neighbors that are multi-generational owners of a beautiful property that adjoins ours.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. That gives me even a more clear picture of how you've gotten to where you're at. So we've talked photography, we talked farming, we've talked the wedding venue. You have several enterprises going all at once. Is that important to the financial success of where you're at? Is that just based on your interests in different things?
Yeah, definitely both. It's helpful because there's seasonality to, of course, to the farming business and also to the event business. So it's nice to have, Jill still has a photography-based business online. She doesn't shoot weddings anymore, but we'll have to have her on to talk about that sometime. But yeah, it's nice to have the diversified income streams in that there's seasonality to all of it. And I think for our entrepreneurial journey, it's been cool to focus on one thing, get that one thing down really well, build the team that can service it even better than you could by yourself, service that need, and then that can create some bandwidth in there to do another thing where you see another need. And that's we haven't done that many different businesses, but that's how we've approached it entrepreneurially. Can I tell you about my new farming venture?
Can't wait.
Okay. This is my, if someone wanted to start a farm and they said to themselves, I have no land and I'll tell you about beef cattle. This is my take. If you had no land and no cows, and cattle prices are high right now, so you're like, how would I even get started? Here's what you do. Here's what I'm doing. There's a few assumptions in this. One, you do need to know how to raise beef cattle. You need to have at least a beginner to intermediate knowledge of working cattle.
Or know someone who does.
Someone who does. And, so start with that. If you don't know anything about it, obviously there's more to it than go out and try this. But if you have any experience raising cattle and you want to make money, but you can't afford buying a bunch of cows right now, and you can't afford buying land because land's crazy expensive, here's what you do. We lease half of the acreage that we farm. So we farm about 500 acres. We own about half. We lease about half. And leasing land in our region is way more cost effective than buying it. And that's just like any county near us. You're going to rent land from anywhere as low as like $30 an acre, or even I know of farmers that don't pay anything to rent land to farm it. To maybe as high as maybe $75 an acre. And so you could rent a farm for, let's say, 100-acre farm for $40 an acre. That's going to cost you $4,000 a year. Versus if you tried to buy that 100-acre farm, you'd probably have a mortgage payment that would be twice that much a month. So very cost-effective way if you can find a lease to get ground. And the second thing you do once you have the lease is you can custom graze cattle, which is what I'm doing. So custom grazing is you have a relationship with a stockman that owns cattle, and you can do this with a stockyard. I know stockyards, like there's one in West Virginia, there's one just north of us here in Virginia that do this, and they pay farmers on contract to raise cattle for them.
Wow. And
typically what you would do is get stockers, they're often called, which is usually steers, and you would get them as weaned calves, and you would get paid on the pounds that they gain from while they're at your farm from in the spring when they're weaned, which means they're not with their mamas anymore, until the fall when the cool season grasses have finally died off and you're out of forage to graze, and you send them back to the stockman that owns all the cattle, and you get paid on those pounds of gain. So, for example, you would get a 400-pound steer in the spring, and this is easy math, so just round numbers. You would ideally get that calf to I would say nearly double in weight, but just for easy math, we'll assume it doubles in weight.
To gain 400 pounds.
Yeah, and you'll get paid on those pounds per gain. And so like in our area, I'm getting paid 60 cents per pound of gain per animal.
Okay.
So let me do the math right here. 60 times 400 would be $240 per head. Yeah. So you would gross $240 per head. So zoom back out on 100 acres. If you could put 100 steers on it, which is pretty normal for our region, and that's not rotationally grazing them. You should just, on a good piece of ground, you should be able to do about one animal per acre. If you start rotationally grazing in a few years, you'll be able to do twice that much. But for easy math,
we digress.
Yeah, we digress. 100 acres, 100 steers, 240 a head. That's $24,000 a year.
And you're paying how much for the land, for the lease?
$4,000 for the lease.
Okay.
And there's some assumptions in here, like, you need to find a farm that has fencing where you're not spending a ton of money on fencing and those kinds of things. So it's like anything real estate based. There's some key pieces to make it profitable. But then, so you say you're clearing $20,000 a year for easy math. Then if you're able to rotationally graze those animals, so you'd have to invest in some temporary electric fencing. I'd put that in the ballpark of 2,000 to maybe 5,000 if you're kind of going all out with you might need to do some water lines and things like that to be able to have multiple water sources on a property. But yeah, I think even for under 10 grand, you could outfit this 100 acres and be able to rotationally graze it and then increase your stocking density. And so year 2, you might be able to have 150 steers on that 100 acres. And year 3, you might be able to have 200 on those 100 acres. That might sound crazy, but those are the kind of, you look at the efficacy of rotational grazing. There's lots of long-term studies. Our good buddy from church up at the Cyrus McCormick farm, Virginia Tech owns a farm where they've been doing a multi-decade closed herd research on this that Gabe can tell you all about. But Gabe, who runs this research farm, again, I digress.
Gabe, another great podcast guest.
We gotta get Gabe on. You're right.
He'll
Gabe,
hate it, but we'll love it.
Yeah, we'll be pulling teeth to get him on here. But Gabe, if you're listening, we're coming for you. But yeah, so anyway, you can see the math. All of a sudden,
can you describe rotational grazing? Because that was like we went from 100 steers to 2 with the term rotational graze. What does that mean for someone who's new to the idea of farming?
Yeah, so generally speaking, there's 2 ways to graze a pasture with livestock. There's what's called continuous grazing, where you don't rotate the animals often.
Same patch of grass for the whole summer.
Yeah, like a lot of 100-acre parcels around us are split up into 20 or 30-acre fields that you move the cows through, once every few months kind of thing. In rotational grazing, that's intensive rotational grazing, is where you would move those cows every day. If not, in some cases, some guys move them 2 to 3 times a day. And the idea is you're letting, when you dial down the paddock size for those animals, you're doing a lot of things at once. One, for the animals, you're mimicking the pressure of nature. Like if you look at a video or, if you've ever seen wild, wildebeest or bison grazing, they're not all spread out like you imagine when you see so many farms where a hillside's just dotted with cows. When you see a herd of bison out on the plains grazing, they're generally in sort of a tight, it's like a swarm in the middle. And there's some sentries around the outside for sure, but there's sort of a tight swarm that's moving around. So that's because of the pressures of predators in the wild. Obviously, thankfully, at least in Virginia, we don't have that many predators, so there's not the same pressure for cattle to do that. So we mimic that pressure with electric fencing. We make the paddock smaller. And then what that does for the cows, as well as it makes the grazing more competitive. So they're going to eat, they get, okay, I have this one spot for this one day. I need to get to eating. And they start to realize if they don't, somebody else is going to eat it. So there's this small competitive gain in grazing the livestock. And then for the land, what you're doing is you're giving it an intense workout for that one day or that half a day paddock that you've put them in. And then they move to the next paddock. So that paddock you left or that you started them in now gets rest. There's no more cows grazing on it. There's no more impaction from the hooves. There's no more manure. It just got a concentrated hit of all of that stuff. And then it gets to rest for a long period of time. And that rest is what makes it so ecologically beneficial, because that's when the soil has time to absorb the nutrients from the manure. It has time for the grass to go back to capture carbon as it grows tall, versus if you continuous graze, the field will basically just stay short for the whole year, because the cows are just going around sort of picking all over, and it keeps it trimmed to this nice low height. With rotational grazing, you want that grass to grow back tall and get more forage. And there's differing schools of thought on how tall and at what stage to graze and all that. But
that's helpful, the rotational grazing idea, because you can double the capacity on the particular land.
And it improves the quality of the soil so that you're, as it rests, it's like working out. What's the saying? Like, you don't grow in the gym, you grow at home or whatever. You grow can't remember. You don't grow at the gym, you grow at home. That's because the idea is you grow from the rest period. And it's the same thing with any organic system. Same thing with the soil, with the grasses in it. And thus you can stock more animals on a given acreage with time.
Okay.
I obviously could nerd out about that for way too long.
That was really helpful. But this is your answer to the young person that says no land, no facilities. What do I do?
Yeah.
And the answer from you would be custom grazing.
Yeah, custom grazing right now is really attractive. And the last thing I'll say about it is that's attractive is, generally speaking, in custom graze contracts, you have pretty limited risk exposure, in that if you went out and bought 100 steers, obviously you've got that cash, that capital that's now on the hoof in the field, and it's a living thing and it's out in nature. So things can happen. Like, unfortunately, earlier this summer, we had a big lightning storm, and there were 2 of our steers. I came out, the next morning, and 2 of the steers that were hanging out on the top of this knoll got struck by lightning and died. And obviously a bummer for me as the grazer and for the stockman. We have a good relationship, so he knows. The owner of the animals understands. It's a lightning strike. Can't really do anything about it. But the nice thing for the custom grazer is you have less exposure. So I'm not out whatever the going rate would be for those steers at that weight. Say it's maybe $800 to $1,000 a head, that I didn't lose. I just lost the potential profit I was going to make off of them.
Right, which we said was $240.
Yeah, so I'm out a few $100.
Right.
So you're not having to come up with a ton of capital to get started. You do need to have the knowledge, the relationships. You got to find the opportunity for the land, but for very little capital and very little risk, you can raise animals, get more experience doing it, and make money the whole time. And if you can find enough ground and enough animals to stock, it can be profitable because there's limited costs.
It's awesome. I imagine that might play into the future of Big Spring, which is the kind of the last topic we wanted to hit, was where are you all going? You are a man with many irons in the fire, which I love.
This is true.
And to use the blacksmithing analogy, so where are you going? Where do you want to end up?
So our vision is to build community based around regenerative agriculture, growing healthy marriages, and thriving families. So it all just starts with what we're doing in our own household. And we have other families here at the farm now too, that we feel called to do life with. And I think beyond our farm, in our broader community, y'all's family and many others, some of which will be on the podcast. But so practically where we're heading is, for the near-term future, we're selling off our cattle herd, which I was a co-owner of, because prices are high and it made sense for the partnership to do that. I'm striking out on my own and doing custom grazing with livestock, or with the stockers, like I was talking about, with cows, steers. And I'll have, steers, heifers, all kinds of custom grazing there. Also still going to do the poultry business next year. So going to raise chickens, turkeys, and ducks. We still have good relationships with a couple of restaurants. You know what I'm talking about? Wink, wink. Daniel's being one of them. Yeah. And raising it for our family, for other families near us, would be a joy. And it's also so good for the pastures that I'm excited to do that next year. And then on the farming, or on the Big Spring events side of things, we're continuing to do weddings, and we've started doing more retreats, and we are starting to do some more corporate events. And our passion there has really been on the marriage side of things. We started coaching with a marriage coach, Julia Woods. Gosh, I guess that was like 5 years ago now. And that was a turning point for our marriage. We were 7 years into marriage. All of this outward success, outside looking in, you'd think like, wow, everything's going great. And between Jill and I, there had been years of building resentment that we didn't know what to do with, that we thought we could just agree to disagree on, that became a bigger and bigger wall. It was like a brick by brick wall that we could tell we were on the, well, we would say, you know, we're Christians. I come from a divorced household growing up. And so we would say like we never would actually have gotten a divorce, but we were heading towards an emotional divorce in our hearts. And Julia helped us turn that around 5 years ago with marriage coaching. And she started doing in-person events because her gifting is so geared towards being face-to-face. And we found ever since the pandemic that's huge. People really are looking for unique spaces to gather for, be it corporate, more formal like work/organizational meetings, amidst a mostly virtual workspace, or for things like marriage retreats, which Julia started doing. We did, we did 1 last year, 2 this year. We're doing 3 next year, and loving that. And then alongside all of that, we're also adding more lodging to the property. So we'll have to talk about Airbnbs on another episode, but we have a couple Airbnbs that we have done, and both of them are on the farm, and it's been really fun. A really great, each one's been like just a great learning experience. Really, Jill and I both love redoing old houses and that kind of thing. So that's, and building new. So that's where we're headed with adding more lodging to the property, as we see, one, the need for weddings to have a lot of weddings want to stay not just 5 minutes away in town, but literally on the property. And we would love for that to be the case more. So we need more lodging, and also for the retreats and things like that. It'll go hand in hand to have more lodging here. And our dream is that families would come back here even after their wedding day, or after a marriage retreat, or maybe a corporate conference or whatever. Because of the beauty of the place, the quality of the whole area. It's like when you discover Lexington and this part of the valley, it's such a gem, and a lot of people just make it a destination too. So anyway, capitalizing on that and providing a new unique take that's at the farm is the other, lodging wise, the other place we're headed.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's an inspiration to watch you grow, and I'd leave recording the podcast just fired up with my ideas. So you're doing big, awesome things, and I'm building a hay bale maze.
Yeah. Yes.
We come full circle.
That's right. Dude, thank you. I appreciate the encouragement. I mean, as you know, there's so many joyous, yes, we made it days. And there's so many days where it's, where you're pushing and you need somebody, shoulder to shoulder. So thank you for the encouragement, man, and for hearing me out on some of my stories.
Yeah.
And
I learned a lot.
Helpful for anybody listening.
Yeah. Awesome. And Buddy and I started the day on the Polaris on the top of the hill, looking over your property. Yeah. What a gift. What a gift to be here chatting with you. So thank you. Thank you to anybody listening.
All right.
God is good. Take care.